So what's the biggest thing we should take away from the Las Vegas Grand Prix, folks? To take an L sometimes. In the end, it did turn out okay. It was a very good race. The track did provide us some action, even though it was really, really bad at the beginning. There are still some things that we really shouldn't be ignoring just because the rest of it and the race went by really well. Next year, we should look to the Las Vegas Grand Prix with a little bit more optimism, that things can be learned and things can be improved, things can be resolved. But one thing I really cannot be resolved with is the fact that Toto, you get in the dark pit right now! Instead of thinking like a team principal, this weekend, he acted like a businessman. Seeing as he's the only boss in Formula One that owns a stake in his own team, that is now currently worth $4 billion, he let loose at a legitimate question in a suspiciously vehement manner as his best interests were laid bare. He needed this race to go very well because if it didn't, F1's value and stock price would go down, as well as the value of his team. So it was very important for him to just laugh it off and go, oh, it was nothing, you'll all forget about it, the Europeans don't really watch it anyway because of the time zone. What? No, the reason why it was done at this time was to be a little bit more considerate to international audiences, Toto. This was not a good look for you. And the cover, it didn't matter? Really? Would it matter if this had happened to one of your cars, Toto? If Carlos Sainz hadn't lifted, many doctors would have confirmed that this could have led to Carlos Sainz being paralyzed for life. Thank goodness Carlos saw the yellow flag matrix a second earlier. That could have been so much worse. And if the rumors are true, that you and Mercedes would have been the only team resisting the leniency and giving a pass to Carlos Sainz so he wouldn't have to have that 10th place penalty because this was no fault of his own? No, Toto, this was absolutely terrible. Stop thinking about money and start thinking about other drivers. Okay, on to the winners now. First of all, shout out to Donny Osmond. Very nice work on the national anthem there. Sounded very Christmassy, by the way. And look at that trophy. Whoa, that looks gorgeous and very Vegas. And if it lights up as well, it has LEDs in it. Oh, that would look fantastic on any mantelpiece or any shelf, or by Max Verstappen's computer, as quite clearly, he won the race. But my heart goes out to Charles Leclerc. He looked very assured the entire weekend, even with Ferrari's bad luck. And even though he lost the win, he did a great job to show some good racing. And that last lap lunge, that was feisty. We need to see more of that from Charles Leclerc. He felt for the first time in a long while confident with the car that he could make moves like that and capitalize on the fact that Sergio Perez and Red Bull got the setup for his car a little bit wrong. This is the first race in a while that Ferrari could score some big points against Mercedes, bringing them to only within 4 points of second place in the Constructors. If they can get that, take that from Mercedes, who have held on to that position for a very long time, that will be a nice little boost to end the season with, considering that Max Verstappen and Red Bull have completely dominated. This will be a very nice little earner for Fred as well. Not to mention bolstering Charles Leclerc's psyche going into the winter break. Sergio Perez, I told you, Brazil was a major boost in his confidence. He looked so in control despite his bad luck in Q2 when the team got cocky and kept him in seemingly against his wishes. He was querying it and they kept him in anyway. But despite starting 12th, he managed to make up for it with his street smarts, and even though he was handicapped by a very much more loaded rear wing, which meant that he was a sitting duck down the straights, he managed to get up from 12th place to 3rd amongst all of the chaos. This was one of the best races we've seen from Checo in a while. Completely drama-free, he managed to get a podium, and most people will say, well, it should have been a Red Bull one too. But remember, he started 12th and got up to 3rd through no fault of his own. Red Bull were just very cocky. It's a shame he didn't win it, considering at some points he was leading the race and he looked really assured. But this is something that he really needed to show. And considering that Hamilton didn't really score that many points, neither did Mercedes, he's now secured 2nd place. He has given Red Bull exactly what they have been craving for ever since they started winning Grand Prix and Constructors titles. So therefore, I think he will be going into 2024 with that seat. He's good. And so long as he can keep up this momentum into 2024, he will see out his contract. Now, okay, we've got to talk about another big winner, Lance Stroll. And may I say, he looks good with that goatee and that longer hair. He looks like a villain. Wow. Okay. And that good form carried on into the race where he got his 2nd top 5 finish in as many races. Sure, he finished 6th on the road, but because of George Russell's little incident, we'll talk about that later, he managed to get another 5th place when Alonso looked really sloppy with that turn 1 spin and not really being able to address anything else. He did score as well, but Lance Stroll clearly was the stronger driver. Many people, of course, will think there's some kind of conspiracy. They changed the car to favor Lance, but I don't think they would actually do that because that would anger Fernando Alonso, and I think Alonso would be shrewd enough to be aware that something was going on with his car. It's quite clear he prefers the spec of car that we saw in Bahrain, where Lance, despite his injured hand, scored 6th place. Again, this is something we need to take another L on. This was another good, impressive form. Of course, Lance Stroll may fall off again, but right now, he's sitting pretty. And that's something we need to acknowledge. They could get 4th place back again. The team was really much an unknown going into Vegas, and they actually managed to pull it out of the bag. But speaking of McLaren, good boy, Oscar, good boy! I'm going to put him in as a winner here. Even though he was only 10th, remember where he started? He was practically at the back. They knew they weren't going to be all that great going into Vegas, but they didn't expect to be that bad. But when you put that hard tyre on Oscar Piastri's car, it came alive, surprisingly. He was overtaking all of the time. He got the fastest lap as well, and for a long time, he was troubling the top 3. And of course, he did have to come in and stop again. This is something that Oscar Piastri should be proud of. He managed to give McLaren something to smile about, considering that they were not smiling about anything, and Lando Norris looked really scruffy. This was very much needed for Oscar after the last couple of races where he's looked really anonymous and Lando's been completely overshadowing him. He was really on it this weekend. I knew there was something cooking when he got that 2nd place in FP3. Just turns out he needed the C3 tyres to really sing. Now, okay, I know many folks in the comments are going to be saying, oh, you really think Ocon was washed? Look at he got 4th place. Yes, okay, I will acknowledge, again, he did good. He got 4th place. Nobody was expecting Alpine to be that good, but he really didn't do it in a very graceful manner, did he? He was ignoring team orders, he didn't hold station like he was told to, he was thinking about himself and the battle he's having with Gasly for the place in the championship. He is now within 4 points of Gasly, taking 12 points, whereas Gasly completely fell off the rails with his tyres giving up the ghost. Okay, that is something I will accept. Ocon did good in the end. But he really didn't make a good impression at the beginning of it, with his dancing around with Ocon in qualifying, and he qualified 17th. Now, context here, folks. Everyone was thinking that Max was racing Ocon, but if you look closely, as this tweet from Multiviewer implies, that Ocon was already messing around with Max before the lap even began, meaning that both cars were compromised going into their quali runs, and therefore they really couldn't get another lap in. So Ocon started it, let's just say that. Why can't he just leave Max alone? But going back to Max, even though many people were getting a little bit sick and tired of Max constantly dogging on the Vegas circuit and the entire event around it, when he was finally pushed about it, he did come up with a really eloquent response, talking about emotion, how he felt like as a child about being in Formula One, and how that's really sort of been deviated away from, that it's all about party, party, party. This was really well done from Max, because we heard previously just little grumpy remarks about, oh, I'm not going to enjoy it, or, oh, why are we even here? We look like clowns. Now he was giving a much more mature response. I really recommend that you give it a watch. I'll leave a link to it in the pinned comment, because this was something that you really need to see. This is Max at his most mature, and this is the way a champion should be talking, instead of just being a little bit petulant and stubborn and wanting to get out of there. Definitely a good win there, as well, of course, on the track. The 5-second penalty being completely meaningless. They really need to deal with that. There needs to be a minimum 10-second penalty, or 5 seconds for really small offences, 10 seconds much more often. Then we get to the drivers and teams that are a little bit neither good or bad, and I will say Gasly. My god, that was really, really bad luck at the end. For the longest time, he was holding station in the top 5. He was looking really odds on for points after that really assured and surprising qualifying run, whilst Ocon was having fun messing around with Max. He was doing the business in a much more mature manner. But in the end, he didn't have the car to take him to the finish, and he fell out of the points in a spectacular manner. This was not Gasly running out of talent. This was the tyre just simply giving up on him, having run it for so long. Ocon having the much more aggressive pit stop strategy, it just simply didn't work for him. Alpine told Ocon to hold station, Gasly was abiding by that, and then Ocon decided to go for it anyway, and then they had a little bit of an argy-bargy. Both of them get props for keeping it clean, but this is really not a team at the moment. Ocon is very much thinking about himself and trying to get a scalp against Pierre in response to what happened in Brazil, when Ocon had that crash, and then Pierre scored some points when nobody was expecting Alpine to score. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be happy. There is going to be some revenge plan here, but I don't know when or where. But yeah, bad luck, Gasly. And George Russell? What was Toto smoking when they thought he could go for 4th place? Did he mean on the road, or legitimately? Did they forget he had a 5-second penalty because of that little ding-dong with Max in turn 12? Really, I don't think anyone saw that coming. Even Max looked a little bit surprised that George was just lumbering around on the outside and then just went into Max. That was really odd and really unnecessary, considering that George looked really assured, much more assured than Lewis Hamilton in qualifying, and could have given Mercedes something to smile about and reduced the damage being inflicted by Charles Leclerc up on the front row. Then he makes that little error. Okay, I know I've been trying to defend George quite a lot recently, but even then, come on, that was not good. I will give him a pass from the losers thing because he was doing really well for the rest of the weekend, and he did make up positions at the end. He was on fire there. He was really aggressive at the end. He was very, very fast. One of the fastest out there. But yeah, no. And another thing that was a little bit meh was the fact that there was no support race. And I really feel like Las Vegas could do with one as a little test event on Wednesday, perhaps. Maybe move the opening ceremony to Tuesday. But I've got a really nice idea that could work. I'll talk about it more in the video I'll do tomorrow. If you really want to make this a really good weekend, even for motorsport nuts, why don't you make the Vegas Grand Prix effectively the Western version of Macau? If you can try and get that same sort of hype by running an F3, an international F3 event at Las Vegas to support Formula One, I think that could be a really big draw and something that could rival one day the Macau event. Or maybe not, but it might be a nice little idea to add some hype, give attendees a little bit more value and something that is a little bit more prestigious than just maybe something else or nothing at all. That means there's a little bit more motorsport action and a little bit less, party. Give your thoughts down in the comments, and if you do like it, like the video. Now, okay, the losers. I've got to talk about Williams. Oh my goodness me. I mean, oh God, this was their best opportunity to score points and they botched it, didn't they? They cannot handle when things go askew, when things get safety car-y. They really don't know how to handle this. This is something that they need to work on. I'm pretty sure that James Vowles has acknowledged this as well. Their strategy is not great. They pretty much rely on Alex Albon being really wide as possible to keep people behind him. Instead of the Trulli train from back in the day, it's the Albon train or the Albon Express, because down the straight he's really, really quick. But that wasn't enough to keep Williams in the points, because for the longest time, before that first safety car, they looked really, really good up in the top 10. They looked odds on to be scoring like 18 points in one race. That would have been their best result in years, but once you got those safety cars and, having to change tyres and think what tyres to use, and everyone else clocking on that the hard tyre was really, really good, like McLaren did with Oscar, they fell apart. And Logan, oh dear, I know, people are going to be tearing into him, aren't they? I know, this was not good for Logan, especially after him getting P6 in qualifying. Oh dear, this wasn't his fault, folks. Even Albon couldn't get much out of that car after all of those tyre changes. He lost 2 positions in one corner, Alex, so even he didn't have enough talent to make that car work with all of those tyre changes and having to make pit stop calls. All the other teams looked a little more accomplished, and it shows that Williams definitely has more things to work on. James Vowles is right. Williams are in a state of transition, and this is clearly one thing they need to transition from faster. Yeah, Logan, I'm sorry for him. He's just going to get ribbed. I can't be too harsh on him, but he is still a loser here. Just go easy on him. When that car is working, he is right up there with Alex, but that car was not working for either of them. Now, speaking of another team that couldn't make their car work, oh dear. And Hulkenberg, I think maybe you should have picked the newer car, mate, because Kevin showed it was better than the old spec, but that's really not saying much, considering that they really could have been odds on for points. They were in the points, both of them, for a little bit, but then they fell apart because the tyres, despite the cold, that wasn't enough. It needed to be even colder for that car to have any hope of scoring points. This just shows that this car is absolutely terrible. It's a good qualifying car, but that's it. Neither spec could do anything, not even score any points. All of those tyre calls, it affected them even worse than Williams. And then Hulkenberg retired, and Magnussen was able to hang on to some sort of decent position. But no, they couldn't get any points. They are pretty much locked down in 10th place. And I don't think Alpha are that much better either. Because Bottas, yeah, he made good use of that really slippy circuit. He's really good on those circuits. He got that really good grip position. And then through no fault of his own, he was caught up in the tangle with Alonso's spin. He had nowhere to go. He then had that petulant like he bumped into Alonso, like thinking, how dare you? That was really not fair. And then he just fell apart from there. He couldn't get anywhere. Zhou had a moment where he was in the top 10 for a while, but then he fell down as well. And it's just like, oh, okay, all right. I think we know that Alpha and Haas, barring a miracle in Abu Dhabi, they're locked into 9th and 10th. AlphaTauri, they really had nothing to sing about either. All bottom 4 teams couldn't capitalize on Vegas at all when things were completely out the window in terms of predicting things. They can at least be happy that Williams couldn't capitalize when everyone thought they would. Tsunoda, he had problems, he didn't finish. And Ricciardo, even though he was looking forward to this race, he really didn't have much to look forward to in the race itself. Yeah, so AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Haas, Williams, they were all hoping for points here, and nobody, not one of those teams, not one driver, got anything. And last of all, Lando Norris. He looked completely scruffy the entire weekend. Turns 6, 7, and 8, he just did not look settled in that car at all, or with this track. I think this is going to become a bogey track for Lando, because he really did not look assured here. Whereas Oscar, he looked a little bit more settled than Lando, but that's not really saying much considering that McLaren were really not that great here. They were probably like the 6th or 7th fastest car or something. Oscar was able to find something for McLaren to smile about, but Lando couldn't. He got really unfortunate with the tyre selection. McLaren really didn't do him a service. And then, sure, they managed to make up positions, but then he had the lockup, and then Lando went into the barriers, and luckily he's okay. I think that just summed up his weekend. I don't think this was one that he was really enjoying, even though he had a good time playing golf with Carlos. So even though Logan Sargent didn't score points, Williams are looking a little bit more likely to be keeping him for 2024. They see something in the data that we mere mortals cannot perceive. And if you watch this video next, I genuinely think that James Vowles is onto something, and maybe this is something that they really should be betting the farm on, and appropriate where we are.